The truck driver's hands trembled as he counted the stack of bills. 900, 950, finally $1,000. Always in cash. No receipts, no signatures, no questions asked. A bribe disguised as routine, paid to cross a border where no fee was ever supposed to exist. For 3 years, he had been making this same payment twice a week, and every time it felt like theft because that's exactly what it was. But this day wasn't like the others. This time, every bill in his hand had been marked, every serial number recorded. Hidden cameras captured the exchange from multiple angles. And just 5 kilometers away, in a dimly lit command center, President Ibrahim Traoré himself was watching in real time. The driver had no idea that in that moment, he was stepping into history. What he thought was another forced payment would make him the unwitting key to dismantling the largest border corruption network West Africa had ever seen. For 8 long years, the scheme had operated unchecked. Truck after truck lined up at the Burkina Faso Ghana crossing, drivers slipping envelopes of cash into waiting hands. Their cargo never declared, their shipments never taxed, their paperwork as empty as the promises of the men running the border. The officials collecting those envelopes lived in sprawling mansions, purchased with money that should have built schools, stocked hospitals, or repaired roads. Instead, millions vanished into Swiss accounts and luxury apartments in Dubai. And through it all, silence. Drivers never complained because complaining meant endless delays or sudden mechanical failures that could ruin a business. Silence wasn't consent, it was survival. Until President Traore decided that silence had gone on long enough. The first crack in the wall of corruption didn't come from investigators or whistleblowers, but from grief. A woman named Ibrahim Traoré, unrelated to the president, lost her husband in a suspicious truck crash near the border. 77,106. While sorting through his belongings, she discovered a worn notebook. Every page was filled with dates, amounts, and names. 3 years of bribes, all carefully logged by a man who must have known that one day someone would need the record. The last entry was chilling, a payment of $1,000, made on the very day his brakes mysteriously failed. Amina did not believe in coincidences. She could not trust the police, who were themselves on the take. She dared not approach the press, where journalists investigating the border had a habit of vanishing. So, she made a move no one expected. She walked through the gates of the presidential palace on a public visitation day. She stood in line with farmers begging for irrigation and teachers asking for supplies. And when her turn came, she laid the notebook directly on President Traoré's desk and spoke only 5 words. They killed him for this. The room fell silent as Traoré flipped through the pages, dates, signatures, amounts, and names staring back like evidence in a courtroom file. Officer Kabor at checkpoint 1. Captain Sardogo at checkpoint 2. Major Adrawo coordinating the entire network. The sums were staggering. A single driver, Amina's husband, had paid over $100,000 in 3 years. Multiply that by hundreds of drivers every single day, and the numbers became almost impossible to calculate. Looking up from a notebook, the president gave Amina a promise that would soon shake an entire system. Your husband's death will not be in vain. Give me 30 days. But even as he said it, Traoré knew the clock had already begun ticking. Traditional investigations had no chance here. The border's corruption web had lasted nearly a decade because it operated like a shadow government. Every move was watched, every whisper leaked within hours. Any official inquiry would collapse before it began. Investigators could be bought, threatened, or silenced in days. So President Traoré made an unthinkable decision. He would run his own covert investigation outside the reach of the state's usual machinery. No large teams, no paper trails, just a hand-picked group of 5 people nobody would expect to see in the heart of an anti-corruption mission. The team was unconventional by design, a cyber specialist obsessed with cryptocurrency trails, a forensic accountant who had dismantled international laundering networks, a retired truck driver who knew every scam at the border, a young woman with a growing YouTube channel about logistics and transport loopholes, and most surprising of all, a 70-year-old fruit seller who had worked by the border for decades, invisible to the powerful but sharp-eyed enough to see everything. The cyber expert, David Compower, struck first. Instead of targeting official government devices, which were always monitored, he infiltrated personal WhatsApp accounts of border officers. What he uncovered was staggering. Detailed price lists for every kind of illegal passage. $1,000 for a standard truck, $2,000 for hazardous materials, $5,000 to move restricted goods, $10,000 for things that officially did not exist. The chats read like business group messages, with officers bragging about bribes as though they were commissions. Photos surfaced of luxury trips to Paris, Dubai, and Miami, all bankrolled by cash taken directly from truck drivers who had no choice but to pay. Forensic accountant Dr. Sarah Bongu followed the money trail, layer by layer. The scheme was a work of criminal art. Bribes were split into smaller deposits spread across countless accounts. From there, the funds jumped into shell companies in Cyprus, funneled into Dubai real estate, and eventually circled back into Burkina Faso, disguised as foreign investment. Hotels, restaurants, construct. Firms, all gleaming monuments built with dirty border money. One mid-level officer, officially earning 30,000 francs a month, had quietly built a fortune worth over $10 million. Then came the insights of the veteran truck driver, Mohammed Zongo. After 20 years on the road, he knew every unwritten rule of the system. Never complain, never ask for receipts, always pay in US dollars. Resistance wasn't just discouraged, it was dangerous. Bribes weren't paid in francs because those could be traced. Drivers handed over dollars instead, tucked into a certain pocket, folded in a precise way, so the handoff could happen in seconds without a single witness catching on. New drivers, unaware of the code, were charged double until they learned. And if they refused, their trucks were torn apart in searches that lasted hours. Goods spoiled. Permits mysteriously became invalid. The system wasn't just corrupt, it was perfectly engineered cruelty. One outsider had been piecing the puzzle together without even realizing it. Patricia Ilbudo, a YouTube logistics analyst, had been tracking border crossing data for years. Her numbers showed something bizarre. 6 hours to cross the Burkina Faso-Ghana line, compared to just 30 minutes at any other crossing in the region. She always suspected something was off. Now the truth was plain. That delay was deliberate, a tool to squeeze drivers until they paid up. Her footage backed it up. The same trucks waiting endlessly, then breezing through moments after a quiet exchange with an officer. Patricia had been documenting hundreds of bribes in plain sight, but the most devastating witness was someone no one ever noticed. Mama Adowa, the grandmother who had sold oranges and bananas at the border for nearly a decade. Officials thought she was invisible. In reality, she was watching everything. She knew the officer who drove a Mercedes yet claimed a minimum wage salary. She knew the one with 3 wives, each in a mansion. She knew where the cash was stashed during shift changes. When asked why she never reported it, she gave a bitter laugh. To whom? They all own each other. Armed with intelligence, Traore laid out his strike. The operation would go down on a Thursday, the busiest crossing day of the week, when the bribe money flowed fastest. Undercover agents, disguised as truckers, prepared vehicles fitted with hidden cameras and audio recorders. Financial teams were standing by to freeze accounts at the signal. Prosecutors waited with warrants in hand. But Traore knew one thing mattered above all. The people had to see him in the fight. Not from a palace, not from a TV screen, but with their own eyes. So on the morning of the sting, he stunned his security detail. He dressed as a truck driver. Old shirt, worn boots, a cap pulled low. He climbed into the cab of a truck hauling real cargo and drove straight toward the border. His guards, scattered in disguise as other drivers, nearly panicked. But Traore refused to back down. He wanted to feel what his citizens felt, to taste the humiliation of being robbed by those sworn to serve. As the truck rolled closer to the checkpoint, he saw the machine working exactly as described. Officers drifting between vehicles, stopping for brief exchanges, pockets swelling with folded bills. And in that moment, he wasn't just watching corruption, he was about to put himself inside it. For years, the routine was the same. Drivers would pull up to the checkpoint, roll down their windows, and with almost no words exchanged, money slipped into waiting hands. No paperwork, no questions, just the smooth rhythm of corruption that had been perfected over nearly a decade. When his turn finally came, a young officer stepped forward. His tag read Jean Batis del Budo, only 25 years old, 3 years into the force, and already absorbed into the system. He didn't bother making eye contact. "Papers," he said flatly, flipping open the folder that Traore handed over. After a few seconds of casual scanning, his tone shifted. "There's a problem with your permit. Could take hours to sort out unless..." He let the silence finish the sentence. That was the moment. Traore reached into his pocket, pulled out the folded bills, and placed them directly into the officer's hand. $1,000. Il Budo counted the cash with the speed of habit, gave a subtle nod, and waved the truck forward. The entire exchange lasted less than half a minute. But what Il Budo didn't know was that every second was being recorded. Hidden cameras captured his face, hidden microphones caught his voice, and at the command center, prosecutors were already adding his name to the growing arrest list. Traore parked his truck just past the checkpoint and waited. One by one, undercover operatives repeated the same process. Each bribe was carefully documented, each officer identified, each transaction preserved as evidence. By midday, the team had log proof against 43 border officials, from low-ranking guards to senior commanders. The corruption network was wider than anyone had dared to imagine. Then came the discovery that stunned even the investigators. Following the trail of money, forensic accountants traced every dollar to a single account. The mysterious holder was known only as the gatekeeper. Hours of digging led to a breakthrough. At 2:47 p.m., the name appeared on the screen. The gatekeeper was none other than General Marcus Bombara, head of border security for the entire country. The irony was staggering. The man tasked with protecting the borders had in fact been orchestrating the bribery scheme himself. For 8 years, he had pocketed 60% of every payoff. His personal fortune was now estimated at over $100 million, all stolen in $1,000 increments from truck drivers struggling to survive. At exactly 3 p.m., Traore gave a signal. Across the nation, special forces, not local police who might have been compromised, swept into action. Officers were arrested at their posts, in plain view of the very drivers they had been exploiting. Phones were seized before calls could be made, bank accounts frozen before money could vanish. The crackdown was fast, calculated, and merciless. At the busiest checkpoint, Traore revealed his true identity. Removing his driver's cap, he climbed onto the roof of his truck. The crowd went silent, and then gasps rippled through the line of waiting vehicles. Their president, the man they thought would never see what they endured, had been among them in disguise. He had paid the same bribe they paid, and now he was dismantling the system that preyed on them. With a megaphone in hand, his voice carried over the border post. For 8 years, you have been robbed here, not by criminals, but by the very people sworn to protect you. Today, that ends. Today, these borders belong to the people of Burkina, not to police. He raised his hands and stepped out into the custody of the very people he had stolen from. Citizens surrounded him, ensuring he had no chance to slip away. The sight of the once untouchable general being arrested by ordinary truck drivers and market women became one of the most iconic images in Africa's fight against corruption. It proved that when the people stand together, even the strongest corruption empire can fall. The trials that followed were public, transparent, and uncompromising. Every piece of evidence was laid bare. The hidden notebook from Amina's late husband was entered into record. WhatsApp messages were read aloud in open court. Bank transfers and offshore accounts were revealed on screens for all to see. Footage from the hidden cameras played out in front of stunned citizens, showing bribes happening in real time. Convictions came swiftly. Junior officers received 5-year sentences. Senior commanders were handed decades behind bars. And General Bambara, the so-called gatekeeper, was sentenced to life in prison. But punishment wasn't the only outcome. For the first time in history, every stolen cent was tracked and recovered. A staggering $347 million was seized, money that had been stolen $1,000 at a time. The government announced that every project funded with the recovered money would bear a plaque reading, built with funds recovered from border corruption. Schools, hospitals, and roads were soon rising across Burkina Faso as living monuments to justice reclaimed. Yet Traore knew arrests alone wouldn't be enough. The system itself had to be rebuilt so corruption could never root itself so deeply again. Sweeping reforms were launched. To honor that courage, the drivers pooled their money to build something not just symbolic, but practical. A roadside rest stop with clean bathrooms, affordable food, and free water for anyone passing through. They named it after Amina's late husband, whose secret notebook had ignited the movement. On the wall hung a photo of President Traore standing atop his truck, cap in hand, declaring the end of corruption. Beneath it, a simple inscription read, "He became one of us, to fight for all of us." International observers were astonished. The World Bank called it the most effective anti-corruption campaign in African history. The United Nations adopted it as a case study. Scholars wrote papers analyzing the psychology of a president going undercover and how experiencing corruption firsthand had fueled historic reform. But when asked about his decision, Traore's response was disarmingly simple. "I could never ask my people to endure what I was not willing to endure myself." The message was clear. Leadership, real leadership, wasn't about commanding from a distance. It was about standing with your people, even in their darkest struggles, and proving that change was not only possible, but inevitable. Foreign bank accounts were frozen, fugitives were dragged back home, and for once it felt like justice had no exit door. The climax came during General Bambara's sentencing, a moment no one in the courtroom would forget. His own son, a young law student whose education had been funded with stolen cash, rose from his seat. He faced his father with steady eyes and said, "Every franc you took was stolen from people like me, struggling to build a future. You didn't just take money. You took dreams, you stole opportunities, you shattered lives. Today, I renounce you as my father. Whatever I inherit will go to your victims." The reforms did more than cleanse the borders. Trade routes returned after years of avoidance. Global companies once scared off by corruption reopened their investments. Burkina Faso's International Corruption Index shot up 60 places in just a year. Yet the real proof wasn't in the statistics, it was in the lives transformed. Truck drivers who could finally bring food home without bribes. Farmers whose crops reached markets without extortion. Small businesses free to import without criminal taxation. 3 years later, a documentary revisited the entire scandal. It featured drivers, investigators, and even disgraced officials who admitted their guilt. But its most haunting moment came from a hidden camera inside Traore's truck. The footage showed him, disguised as a driver, sliding $1,000 across the table, his face carrying fury, sorrow, and determination all at once. That image became iconic. It was the instant a leader stopped ruling from the palace and instead lived his people's pain. The film closed with new footage from the reformed border, trucks passing smoothly, guards doing their duties with dignity, drivers smiling instead of cursing, and in the corner of the frame, Mama Ajoa still selling her fruit. But now, she was smiling too. The crossing she had watched rot for 8 years had finally been reborn. The legacy of that operation stretched far beyond Burkina Faso. It proved that corruption, no matter how deeply rooted, could be defeated with strategy, courage, and leaders brave enough to live in the shoes of the people they served. The $1,000 Traore paid that day became the most valuable investment in the nation's history. Not because of its price, but because it carried a message. True leadership begins when a president is willing to walk the road of his people, even if that road is muddy, brutal, and worn down by the boots of truck drivers who only wanted to cross without being robbed.